Welcome to the Midlife Pilot Podcast. We are glad you're with us. What is it like to become a pilot in your 40s and 50s? The challenges are unique for those of us in midlife, but so are the rewards. Hosts Ben, Brian, and Ted talk learning to fly, growing as pilots, and the joy of flying to destinations. The purpose of the podcast is not to teach, but to share knowledge and experiences of being a midlife pilot. Join the Midlife Pilot community and listen in every week. We are not CFIs or particularly intelligent, so if you want to learn how to fly, talk to anyone else other than the hosts of a podcast. Even this intro was too challenging for us, and we used a robot to do it. Okay, checklists are complete. Let's get the show started.
Hello, and welcome to episode 86 of the Midlife Pilot Podcast, where we talk all things flying and aviation in midlife. My name is Ben. I am a commercial certified pilot here in the Atlanta area, flying a Cessna 182 that is currently stuck in Owensboro, Kentucky. We call it the Beast. We have with us tonight, as always, my friend, co-host, Brian, a private pilot. Nashville, Tennessee is where he's located, which is home of the Bachelorette Super Charlie. He flies a beautiful little Cherokee 180 we call Lucy. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, and happy birthday to you, sir.
Thank you. Also tonight, we have our friend, Ted, sport pilot extraordinaire, based in Portlandia. Flight design CTLS, we call the Egg, is his plane of choice. Good evening, sir.
Hey, how are you?
Long time no see.
Brian, your plane is kind of stranded too, so it's kind of the theme.
Yeah, it's just the magnetos are just not in the same state as the airplane, so that'll get righted soon enough.
The state in two different definitions of that. Yes.
Yeah, it's a long drive between. Our magnetos have gone to Florida for vacation, and they just wanted to have a little time to themselves, I guess.
Yeah.
And my alternator died in flight, so at least yours left you while yours are on the ground.
That's right. And I can't wait tonight's going to be a fun episode because we have stories to hear and tell and inquire about, and really glad to be joined by our good friend here, Mr. One Dull Geek.
Hello.
How
are you all? Doing good.
And for the record, One Dull Geek is a commercial rated pilot. He is also a certified skydiver. Is it certified? And you're an instructor skydiver as well, I think.
I have a Class D skydiving license from the U.S. Parachute Association. I haven't exercised it in over 30 years, so I don't know how. My currency is way out.
But you got it, and you also fly a Cherokee 235 out of the Metroplex, as they call it, on opposing bases. So, tonight we're just going to kind of let the stories fly. I do want to hit a few housekeeping items. For those of you listening on your favorite podcast player, we broadcast live on YouTube, usually every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. The live chat is open for questions and comments, and we've got a great group tonight. Saw a couple of new faces in there. We also we ask that if you are listening to us from your podcast player, to please give us a subscribe or a follow, whichever your app does. You can find podcast links, contact information, and all of this stuff at our website, midlifepilotpodcast.com. We'd also like to really point out we've gotten quite a few Patreon supporters this week, and for those of you that are listening on the audio only version, you're missing out on one of the best parts of this community, which is our Discord server, which you can access through a Patreon membership. Brian, do you want to talk about maybe some of these new folks that just joined us?
Yeah, sure. I can run the names and we do something special that we don't talk about publicly for every Patreon supporter that comes through at a particular level and up. And I will just echo the sentiment to all that we are humbled by the support that we get, and we need it to do this. But also, it doesn't escape us that it takes time, energy, and a conscious mind to press buttons and elevate this thing and support it in the way that people do. And it's really humbling. It's really overwhelming. And it makes us want to work even harder to continue to try to bring what we can. But the community, and Mark, you are a huge part of driving how that all works. You actually know how it all works, and we rely on it. So thank you all the time. And also, Ted and Mark and other people, we have unique programming that's happening essentially inside the Discord that is so rich. We have stages built, we have video conferencing, we have private pilot check ride debriefs or commercial check ride debriefs, and we have members step up and share their experiences. And there's a lot of things that I think are not things that maybe people want to just go completely open on the internet with or put on YouTube or something. It's more of a little bit more private and a little bit more open and a little bit more transparent to the community. And it's just amazing how much insight I've gotten from all of the debriefs and all of the other pieces. So anyway, just thanks everybody for driving our Patreon. It's just been awesome. It's been awesome. So real quick, I'll go through the names if you guys are cool with that.
Yeah.
Knock yourself out.
All right. So at the Lando-matic level, and by the way, if anybody doesn't know why we call it the Lando-matic level, Lando-matic was the old sort of marketing term for the Cessna 150. And by the way, that's one of my favorite things about sort of post-war marketing for aviation is it's all geared towards the sales pitch of it. It's just like driving, right? Like they made the cockpits to feel like the cars of the time, and here's your ashtray and whatever. It's all the same, really. Yeah. And so Lando-matic, I always loved that term that Cessna used to market the 150. But anyway, so the Lando-matic is a special tier, although it is the entry tier. But thanks to new members on the Lando-matic level, Brandon T, Neil Lenz, and the Badger Pilot, our friend the
joined
Badger
us
Pilot
tonight in the chat.
Fly Midwest podcast. Please go check that out. And a PayPal drop as well. Massively appreciated. That's just huge. At the Hershey Bar level, we have Bob G, Jason W, Chris D, Nick R, and Ivan M. So a whole bunch of people coming in at the Hershey Bar level. Hershey Bar, obviously an homage to the wings that allow me in a Cherokee 180 to never have to think about where I'm gliding to because I'm going right there. Thank you, Hershey Bar Wing, for making emergency decision making so much easier.
And spot landings. You never have to worry about float.
Oh yeah. It's there's no such thing. So yeah, and at the Beast Stolkit level, we have David B. Thank you. That's a huge level to come in at. There is one level above, which is the caps available level. You know who you are. But the Beast Stolkit, that's basically an homage to Ben's plane that is stuck in Owensboro. And we can't wait to hear all about why that is. But thanks everybody for the Patreon support and for just the activity and the engagement and making the Discord so cool. There's a lot of dumpster fires on the internet, and that is not one of them. It is a respite from the dumpster fires of aviation conversation. So thank you.
Since Mark is on and we're talking about the Discord and all the things that Mark does to help us, he's secretly the fourth host, depending on how you count, either the fourth host or the fifth host of the show. It's just one that you don't see as much. But one of the things that Mark does, this is going to be so confusing for the audio podcast, but he helps us maintain a map of our Discord members who choose to support and tell us where they're at and share where they're at. And so we have a cool map, and it's a great way when you're like, oh, that's right. Don't we have somebody that lives in Colorado? And you can go zoom in and see who that was. So just want to show that real quick, what that looks like.
Plus, I also get to eavesdrop on all of the show planning. So I know what's coming.
Yes.
Even when you're on it, right? Hey, can you pull that back up?
Yeah. Yeah.
So what I'm seeing here is that the Dakotas have if you're listening in one of the Dakotas, will you please just help us fill in this little area? We've got nobody in the Dakotas here, So, but it looks like we've got a lot of Wisconsin, a lot of folks in the Southeast and the Northeast and West Coast, and
West
it's
Coast
really cool.
is definitely represented.
Yeah.
So cool.
One thing I was going to say is that that particular image excludes our one member in Germany.
Yes. Yeah. If you add Germany, it zooms the map out so far that I did exclude that, and I'm sorry, but yes.
When you zoom it out, it looks like we have 3 listeners nationwide. So because it combines it all into one.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you for that, Brian and Mark. So speaking of adventures and Owensboro and listeners all over the country, we thought tonight I would kind of do an Osh recap, and we won't touch too much on Osh, but the adventure home was a little bit more.
By the way, Ben, I'm not sure, Ben, if I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to say I don't think that you've been ever interrogated before for like in a interrogation room. But I want to treat it like this, right?
Okay.
Bright light in your face. You got to start from the beginning.
Yep.
So we want to hear the whole thing.
Yeah, whole thing. Here we go. This has been in the making for about a month and a half. As we've said many times, we're friends with the guys from Opposing Bases, who provides the best podcast service of any other podcast that I know of in aviation. They're extremely nice guys. They're very funny. It's just a great podcast. And they usually do a live show at Osh Kosh. So I decided, one of our co-listeners, if you will, a big supporter of us and them, Juliet Echo Foxtrot, offered a bed at his house outside of Milwaukee. So I would fly up there, ride up with him and another good friend and another supporter, Lord Alpha Juliet. We were 3 were going to meet RH and AG at the gate. And for me personally, there had to be a couple of things fall into place for this to work out like I wanted it to. My brother-in-law scheduled the plane. He was going to try to come back super early Friday morning. And then that canceled, so that freed up the airplane. But then the weather forecast was looking pretty iffy for a morning departure. It was low IFR till 10 a.m. So all of these things. And then Mark, One Dog Geek, drives down from Charlotte, stays with me Thursday night. We wake up Friday morning, and it goes from low IFR to marginal at 8:30 in the morning. Perfect to leave. I will not, for the record, I will not depart on an IFR plan when it is low IFR. If something happens, then, you don't have very many options there. So then, I'm all about the options. We take off. We have a great flight up to Danville. We refuel. I take Mark up to Fond du Lac to drop him off to visit with family. I keep saying Mark. It's One Dog Geek. I apologize for outing your name. And I picked up Lord Alpha Juliet in Fond du Lac, flew back down to Waukesha, and everything was just falling into place perfectly. We have a very nice meal at Juliet Echo Foxtrot's, and it's just like the day is just forming up perfectly.
It's always the worst sign, isn't it?
Say again?
It's always the worst sign, isn't it?
It starts entering into my mind that, okay, things are going too well. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop here in a little bit. But, this was pretty benign of things going right. We had planned to have these big signs made to welcome AJ and RH, standing in the concourse to meet them. The Penguin Penguin Airlines crew bus, we love center controllers, or Icebergless will will work for anything, just something like that. Just funny little signs that we put out there.
What were you wearing?
Well, that's part of the situation. That's major surprise number one. We're parked in the garage. And for those of you who don't listen to opposing bases, all three of you probably, their kind of adopted mascot is the penguin. And we won't go into why, but everything is penguin, penguin, penguin. So I get out of the car in the garage, and Lord Alpha Juliet goes to the trunk and then just holds this package in front of me, which is a penguin suit. He says, "You're putting this on," which, okay, that's fine. If everybody's wearing penguin suits, it's fine. So we take it inside, we get dressed, we're getting stares from everybody, including TSA and the local police. We had a captain of United Airlines walk up to us and high five us saying, "Just keep living your best life." I mean, it was just one of those moments that you kind of go outside your body and looking at, okay, one day you're going to laugh at this. So we're standing there, and by the way, I did forget another major surprise. We're sitting in Jeff's driveway eating brats and burgers, and this car pulls up. I said, "Jeff, you got a guest coming in." It was Alyssa, Alpha Mike, showed up, got to hang out with her. She came to the airport with us. She was our photographer. And so I see AG and RH walk out of the concourse. And then all of a sudden, I see this little black penguin costume run from behind them and then run up next to us. And I look, and it was our friend Ted. I had no idea he was going to be there. So when we talk about things falling into place, I mean, it was like 8 surprises that everything had to go right for all of them to work, and they did. It was just one of those moments that you'll remember.
Yeah,
so
we just had layers of things going on. And so AJ and Jeff and myself had this like extra level of the hidden plan of, the penguin suits was known, but I got, talked into, actually going, and so I was actually on the same flight as the OB guys from Chicago to Milwaukee, all 27 minutes of the flight. Which getting on that flight, not being seen, and then getting off and getting dressed and trying to run after them to like meet them right as they come out of security and get that time. Anyway, that was all crazy, but I'm trying to keep this from Ben, which unfortunately means I'm also keeping it from Mark, who I never did see. We're within 50 miles of each other and the whole weekend, and never did, cross paths. But, yeah.
It was, and we just had a great night, everybody hanging out. So, I mean, it was just, I wasn't planning on being part of the surprise or being the surprisee or the surprise. Yeah. I wasn't planning on being the surprisee as I was. So get up the next morning. We make our way to AirVenture. They did a great podcast. It was a massive crowd there. I think there was around 300 people. And, what I found interesting is the podcast or the show, so to speak, after theirs was Ask the AMPs. And Mike Bush was one of the AMPs. So if you don't know, he's a well-published AMP and knows is highly sought after for his advice. But I think there was a pretty decent number of that group that left. And so they're like, who was here before us? I don't know. It was just kind of one of those surreal moments. So fast forward, we had a great day, watched their air show, spent some money, hung out with the Midwest Flying Group, and got to spend some great time with them. And they recorded a mini cast, and it was just a lot of fun to do with them. I shouldn't forget the cheese curd tacos. I mean, those were pretty life altering.
Yes, pickle and raspberry jam cheese curd tacos, amazing.
Wow,
who would have known? But the Midwest guys discovered that earlier in the week, and listening to their everyday recap, I knew, all right. Got to get the pickle. Would have never ordered except for that. And
that's right.
Yeah.
Nice. Yep.
So good fellowship all the way around. It was just a really good time. So we head back and then get up early in the next morning, and it's my turn to pick up One Dull Geek back from Fond du Lac. So I go up there. It's beautiful weather. He pops in, and I had briefed the weather, as we all do. And I knew that once we got south of Chicago, really kind of almost north central Illinois, it was overcast. There was some rain. There was some precipitation. The convection wasn't really a big concern. And I had called another sidebar. The controller on Sunday morning at Fond du Lac was also a friend of the OB show, a guy named Brian Kelly, who is one of the controllers at Osh Kosh. And he was controlling the tower at Fond du Lac. And I'd asked him, I'm like, hey, can I pick up an IFR? He said yes. So I filed, and we got in the plane and cranked it up and asked for my clearance. And they said, we don't have it. Fine. Pulled up the iPad, refiled it again, waited a few minutes. Nope, still don't have it. And I thought, okay, well, we'll just take off VFR, get south of Milwaukee, and see if we can pick up an IFR from there. And Mark, this is at the point in time when you can jump in whenever you're ready. So we do that.
Understood.
We take off. We know better than to ask for flight following. For those of you who don't know, Sunday's the last day. Whoever's left is departing, and the Milwaukee controllers have no time. They just can't take the amount of volume that's coming through. They can't give you flight following, and you certainly can't pick up an IFR clearance. Okay. We're heading further south, and I did notice it about this time that when I was filing my flight plans, I forgot to change on my iPad. It was showing VFR. So what I was doing is filing VFR plans, which is why they couldn't find it.
Which I believe VFR flight plans come out of a fax machine that goes directly to a shredder. Like
Probably so.
that's the value of a VFR flight plan. So,
And the only thing that conveys them is the hamster wheel.
yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, flight services is like, what the hell are all these flight plans?
I would disagree. They probably know, oh, this guy forgot to change it from VFR to IFR again.
We got one.
So it's starting. We see the weather system in front of us. And, we're calling Milwaukee Control, and we're like, hey, can you give me a pop-up IFR to Owensboro, Kentucky? Stand by. And we wait a little while, and we're getting closer and closer. I'm pulling back on the throttle to slow down. And we're still VFR. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, we're getting close to not VFR. Very close to not VFR. And I'm getting really nervous because the statistics on VFR into IMC are not good even for an instrument rated pilot. So I'm just getting really nervous.
So I'm actually making turns to avoid the cloud, like 90-degree turns east or west, or I think it was turning to the west. But I finally got through. I think we got switched over to Chicago approach, and I just called him up, and I'm saying, I need a pop-up IFR clearance to Owensboro. I got 2 souls on board. I'm a 182. Want to go to 9,000 or 7,000, whatever the number was. I said, we're getting very close to weather, and if you can't give it to me, basically, then I'm going to turn around, go 40 miles in the opposite direction that I need to be, and land and redo this. And he finally gave me a pop-up IFR clearance. So it was, I agree. It was on my mind. Again, I've flown in IMC, but it was really more to stay legal. And, it was something that I will take away that, I knew this was going to be really busy airspace. Everybody knows it. They tell you, don't even bother with the Milwaukee controllers because they are overwhelmed. And that's just how it is. I needed to be more careful when I filed the flight plan.
And when we did this, my memory was that I was looking at UES, Waukesha, and different airports around around Milwaukee that we could divert to if we had to. So my recollection is that we actually picked up the IFR from Milwaukee. Or did we get it from Chicago? I can't remember for sure.
You may be right. I think we picked it up from Milwaukee, and then we were instantly once they put us in the system, they told us to switch over to Chicago. So I definitely, I think you're right on that.
Can you, Ben, describe in a little bit more detail what the clouds were and the conditions were, like sort of how they evolved and what you were looking at that created that point of sort of no return?
Yeah. So, I mean, it wasn't a convective. It was just a thick layer, just your good old fashioned rain clouds. I think they were advertising on the area ASOSs, whichever they had. I think the ceilings were at 3,000 or 4,000 feet, or overcast, I think. And Mark, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. So what I recall was that we had ground contact, but we couldn't see a horizon. It was just this white sort of blur in front of us. And then almost instantaneously after that, we got the IFR clearance. I mean, it was really, really close. Was
it one of those scenarios where you can't, I've definitely had to learn some of this in my VFR experience, but you kind of keep going. It feels like it's kind of closing in on you, but it's really not. It's like the way that your visibility buffer is moving, it just looks bad, but it stays equally. Like you have ground contact. Say you have 5 miles visibility, which is not good, but it's like as long as that continues to slide with you, then it's good. But obviously that can change. So I could see left and right. I could see clear ground. So we were like right on the edge of this cloud that we were about to go into perpendicular. It was going east to west. We were going from north to south. Mm-hmm. So I was on the verge of turning the plane, doing a 180 to turn back, to go back to Waukesha and to refile. Yeah.
And it was literally at that moment when he said, "What's your destination? What's your airplane type? How many souls on board? Are you IFR capable?" Actually, that was the first thing he said. Are you and your airplane IFR capable?
Oh, nice.
And gave him everything he needed. And I knew at that point we're going to get the clearance.
And you said, "Yes, I have an iPad."
For those that don't know, there's a video out about a guy who tried to fly an approach using an iPad, but
it'll be in the show notes. Yes,
it will be in the show notes. So anyway, we get the clearance, we climb up, we have a great chat, we're talking, things are fine. We did notice that when we got on the Champaign approach, we heard this pilot call up 20 Foxtrot Charlie, changed to whatever the next frequency was. And then I heard our friend Lord Alpha Juliet on the radio say frequency change, blah, blah, blah.
Well, I want to interject a little bit. Before that happened, I had heard, I did not realize that 20 Foxtrot Charlie was AJ. And so I had heard, I want to change my destination to OWB, which was where we were going. I'm like, that's interesting. That's a coincidence. And then probably, 10 minutes later, you said, that's AJ. And I'm like, okay. So AJ's going where we're going.
Which was serendipitous, as you'll soon hear. So there's a little bit of weather coming back in over Owensboro. I was getting excited because I thought I was going to be able to shoot an instrument approach and be able to log it. But we get going. We heard AJ going in, and he gave a tops and bottoms report to the controller, so I knew it wasn't going to be able to log it, but that was fine. Flew a nice approach, except I think we had just turned final, or maybe just before turning final.
We were in the position of trying to still hope that we were going to get to count this approach. We were right before the final approach fix, and
that's right.
Trying to just hope it, like, can we count this approach? And
or maybe there was a cloud just after the final approach.
Yeah,
but then all of a sudden, there was a very loud, high-pitched tone in both of our air sets. it almost sounded like a stall horn. Would you agree, Mark? But more like an electronic noise.
An electric stall horn, electronic stall horn. Like somebody had decided, I'm going to use a synthesizer to create a stall horn, and that's what got produced.
And I'm focused on flying these needles, and I just said, Mark, see if it's your headset, and he unplugged it and replugged it, and it was still going on. And I noticed I have a JPI engine monitor, which also monitors voltage. It was flashing. Battery. And I looked up at our analog gauge, and it was showing a discharge. And I just kind of put 2 and 2 together. That's probably the noise. The ball bearings may have gone bad. I didn't know that at the time, but I was like, Mark, we're going to deal with it on the ground. We've got a bad alternator, and we need to get this thing on the ground. Now, I've had an alternator issue in the past. I think it was 2019, and I flew for 20 minutes. I used minimal electronic equipment, but I didn't have an issue then. We were 2 minutes from landing, so I wasn't worried about losing power or anything like that. What was funny is the tower controller at Owensboro said, I need you to report at the final approach fix. 2 mile final. I can't remember what it was.
No, I think it was the final approach fix. And that was exactly when we started having this problem.
Oh. And I'm like 300 feet above the ground, and the tower controller says, 42911, say your position. I was like, oh my God, we've got a bad, my alternator just went out and I forgot to report. He goes, no problem. I'll just get it down the ground, which we did. And we taxied over and got some fuel. That's where AJ was. And there was 2 FBOs. One of them happened to be closed. So we taxied over to the other one. And it's a Cirrus mechanic shop. Now, they do other planes, hopefully. Well, I know they do now, but we got out of the plane, and AJ said, maybe we can fly formation. And I said, nope, this plane's staying here. AJ had a bunch of camping gear and stuff, so we had to move a lot of stuff over to my plane, park it there. One Dog Geek, AJ and I went and got some lunch because the weather current at McCollum, home for both AJ and I, was not good, and it was better that we waited it out. So we went and got something to eat. So what questions do you have so far? And we'll go to phase 2 of this story.
Well, one of the questions I have is, you were very, very close to landing when you realized that you had this problem, and you knew that you had enough power to make it through. That being said, did you do anything to limit consumption of electricity even in that short-term lookout? Because what if you need to go mist? And what if, I don't know, any number of things.
No, it's a great question. Having gone through this exercise before where I turned everything off but the radios, and I actually planned on a no-flap landing because flaps use electricity, or at least mine do. Runway was already in sight, and I literally had the thought, I'm not going to waste my time fooling with switches and buttons and things. I'm 45 seconds away of putting this thing on the ground.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but I unplugged all the charger stuff that we used for iPads. I
had no idea, and yeah, that's great. And thank you for doing that. Yeah, it's, if we were 20 minutes earlier, yes, I would be shutting things down. What I did the last time was I would shut everything down. And when I needed to make a radio call, when I got close to McCollum, when I was doing that, I would turn everything back on, or turn the master on, turn the radios on, and make my calls and let them know what my situation is to conserve as much power as possible. So,
did you have landing lights on?
I did not.
Okay.
I had this high-pitched sound buzzing very loudly in my ear, and I just wanted to get the thing on the ground.
No, I'm saying it's a good thing you didn't have landing lights on.
Yeah. I mean, again, we were so close from it. I mean, we were 3 miles from the airport. So
But that's also why I didn't tell you that I unplugged stuff, because I'm just doing it. I'm not telling you. You're busy.
That wouldn't have changed any flight characteristics. It's fine. You know what? I'm glad that you did it. I would have probably done the same thing if the roles were reversed. So, so I called the owner of the mechanic shop and said, "Hey, I'm going to leave it here. This is what I'm thinking is going on." We got a call from them this morning. They're taking a look at it now. So that's all well and good. I got to tell you, and I think I'd like to see if we can't get AJ on the podcast next week, because as a 1,000-hour pilot, I learned some really cool stuff from AJ. And we had a great time. It was fun, but we had some serious weather to manage. And I've not seen anybody manage it as well as he has. We take the same approach as far as the routes we're going to take, but how he handled the radios, I was really impressed. And we can get into more of that, but I will also say that AJ and now are an exclusive club. We're now Chalks Brothers for life. Because AJ forgot the Chalks. I have audio proof of it. We'll get to it next week. But it's the lesson to take away from here. And I know Mark's going to have some additional comments on this. We were finding on our own routes. We had eyes outside, and we would stay between these systems where we could see, especially where we didn't want to be. And most specifically, and I can dive into this deeper, but McCollum was advertising the RNAV for runway 9. The winds were coming from due south, and it's a 927 runway configuration, and it was only like 4 knots. So it's going to be a crosswind from whichever runway you're on. And we're both looking at our iPads, and there was a big red blob sitting on top of the final approach fix for RNAV runway 9. And the Atlanta Center wanted to put us on an arrival. And that arrival took us through some of the worst parts of the storm. And AJ spoke up and he said, "That's not going to work for us." He said, "There's a lot of," he didn't say all of this, but we really need the ILS to 27, and we need to turn more eastward now to stay north of all this system, and we can get around it. And that center controller said, "Okay, let me coordinate." He came back to us and he said, "Yep, approach said that's a much better plan than what they had." He wasn't going to be told what we knew. We advocated for us. I should say he advocated for us.
Yeah.
And I hadn't seen anything like that before. And I really liked his approach. It wasn't rude. Everybody was cool. It was a really cool experience.
Can we play that clip? Do we have that clip? Or we want to wait till next week?
The advocating, we don't have that one.
We don't have it queued up. We'll talk to AJ about it. But
I look forward.
There was a lot of moments in that I think we can at least touch on.
Yeah,
through that.
The way I described it was, I thought AJ was really collaborative, right? He wasn't saying no. He was saying work with me, and he did it in a way that was just worked really well. It was impressive. My reaction to that flight was, there is a metric ton of stuff to instrument flying that you just don't get taught in instrument training. Just a ton of stuff.
What things stand out to you, Mark?
So 2 things. First, AJ was very definitely the PIC, and he's saying, "This doesn't work for me. What can we do better?" And then the second was, like, he was saying, he kept saying things like, "Hey, I'm going to ignore the radar that I have in the airplane. I'm going to let the center controller, who has much better radar than we have, tell us what the best way to go is. But I'm going to also say, well, okay, except for, I do see this problem. Do you see this problem?" And I mean, it was, and then, being able to say, okay, I can see that this is a gap that I'm going to go through, and I'm going to try and take it. And, little 2 or 3 degree turns that he doesn't request, hey, I'd like a 2 or 3 degree deviation. He just takes them. And just a bunch of stuff. It was educational. I thought it was great. And I am certain that AJ's head like won't fit through the door again. But it was great. It was great.
We've got so much more in store about that. But the one thing that I used to do that I will never do again, and that I learned from AJ, is when I'm flying through South Georgia, I made it a habit, and it's not a bad habit, but I want to work with the controllers that helps both of us. And so if I have a system that's over a plate that's in between me and my destination, I'm going to go pick out some intersections, some waypoints, and I'm going to plot it out to what I think is a good route. And then I'm going to call the controller, and I've done this multiple times. How about if I proceed from this fix, then direct to this fix, then direct destination? How does that look? And, they love it. They think that's, they now know my plan of action.
Yeah.
But I'm using my data. And I'm kind of back checking it with them saying, does that look okay to you? AJ's approach is, and I think this is better, is their data is good right now. Mine's, I'm taking a guess. So, tell me of a route that will give me a heading, or if you want to give me a fix, whatever the case may be. And that's something that I took away, that yes, their equipment is a lot better than mine, and their picture is a lot clearer, or their overall big picture is a lot clearer. So, that I just get my hats off to them. I don't want to inflate that guy's ego any more than I have to, which is why I brought up the whole chocks situation, because it knocks him down just a little bit. So, were there any questions in the chat that anybody in the chat have any questions about this?
While we're getting questions from people in the chat before we close out, I'm really curious, Mark. You are a very big fan of instrument flying, and you love procedural flying. Would you say that you learned something when you're observing someone else and how they're handling these things? Did it give you a sense of, I don't know, a particular agency or leeway within such a procedural framework that maybe surprised you? Or is there something about, I don't know, when you're talking about 2 to 3 degree corrections, right? I'm just curious.
No, so my reaction to that was, I thought you, Brian, would have loved it.
Yeah.
Because I am very procedural. I even made a comment to AJ when we were taking off about my sort of process is incredibly procedural. It's incredibly structured. I do the same thing every time, exactly the same way. That's the way I behave. And it was an eye opener to me to watch AJ just treat it as an art form. And it was less procedural. It was more I'm going to feel this out. I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do. I'm going to react in the moment. And it was really interesting to me. I'm like, wow, this is a challenge to how I need to incorporate this. I need to get better at doing this.
Interesting.
Yeah. Again, I've got to figure out ways to ground him a little bit better, because, he's getting a lot of praise tonight. He deserved it, though. I mean, doggone it. And here's what kind of hurt as well. He greased it when we landed. He greased it. I mean,
and popped a wheelie, and he held a wheelie in the 182 for probably 200 feet.
1 del ballast
down.
He had Mark,
1 del ballast.
He had Geek and Spotted Cow in the back. So, what was that, about 12 packs of Spotted Cow? It was somewhere around that range.
So,
So
Mark, I have another
Michael,
question for you.
Well, hang on. Michael Gillette in the comments, also birthday boy Michael Gillette, said, "This story makes me sweaty, even that close." Yeah. So I think that's a good comment. Yeah.
So, Mark, when you were checking out Ben's alternator before departing.
I didn't know where Ben's alternator was before departing.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. That's what I would say too.
I mean, it seems like you just, I don't know, it seems like you have a tendency to not communicate to Ben what you're unplugging. And I just didn't know if earlier down the line here, maybe there was a moment where you just decided, hey, what my Cherokee doesn't have. I don't know. That's different. I don't know. But so
where the heck is the flap handle?
That's right. The Johnson bar. So but my question also to you, really both of you guys, Geek and Ben, is I'm interested to know what you guys walk us through how you set up and executed your crew resource management, because obviously, Mark, you felt in that scenario that you had agency to start doing things, right? And that's got to be under the umbrella or the auspices of some, I don't know, obviously mutual respect as sort of pilots and understanding the situation. But there's a certain amount of deference. You probably needed to understand what was happening or see signs from Ben and all that. But I guess just down the line through the whole process, especially with the sort of rockiness of getting your VFR flight plan converted.
Well, we had some, like, on the ground, we had talked about, hey, what are we going to do about radios? And I said, I'd love to help if that would be helpful to you. And he said, yeah, so let me do the radios once we take off. But once you get on with approach, you'll cover the radios. That was fine. And sort of, I handled the radios all the way down, and Ben warned me that he was going to steal the radio call many, many times. And it didn't happen once in either direction.
Nice.
Up towards, Wisconsin or back. So he did very good. I think he had something where basically whenever he heard his radio sign, he just pointed at me, and that helped him to not, like, steal the radio call, which also helped me to, like, oh yeah, that's the tail number that I should be responding to. And the number of times that I said my tail number, 070 whiskey instead, like, was disturbingly frequent.
Yeah.
Mark, I don't remember this, but can you respond to our friend Nathan Ballard's claim here? How was the landing in Owensboro?
The landing was great in Owensboro. It was really good.
So too. I couldn't remember. I just had so much on my brain thinking, I knew we had AJ to take us there, but my brain was going to, how am I going to get back to Owensboro?
Hang on. The question that Nathan Ballard asked was, he said, did one Dull Geek also unplug all the GoPros so there was no evidence of Ben's claim to greatest landing ever in Owensboro? Yeah. So, it's like, oh, darn, I unplugged it because of the battery. That's why.
Unfortunately, I had intended on recording these flights both ways, but I forgot my audio cable that would allow me to record cockpit audio. So there was no point in recording the rest of it. So we have no evidence.
So
Jody Ollivant commented, definitely check this out. I appreciate the IFR vs flight plan confusion. It reminded me to log into flight services and sign up for text reminders to cancel a flight plan. That's another useful too. I did leave out one kind of major thing that we did that I'm really excited about that I don't think I told either of you. Ted, I think I may have told you. We flew the Chicago Skyline route.
You didn't tell me. That's great.
And it was everything that Mark is the one. I was like, oh, let's just get up there. And he's like, maybe we'll get it coming back down. And he's like, take advantage of it now. Do it now. And he helped.
Because we had VFR on the way from Danville, where we got fuel, to Fond du Lac. And so, like, I thought we might not have VFR on the way back, so let's do it now.
Yep.
And turns out you couldn't even take that route on the way back. I forgot you did do that because I did see the picture. I think Mark, we can't decide if we're going to call Mark or Wendell Geek. So whatever. Everybody, you know what it is. Yeah. But I think you shared a picture, or Ben shared a picture of that. We'll make sure to put it in Discord so people can see it as well. But Mark, I want to know when all the screaming of the engine and the screaming of Ben started, what from there to landing, like, what were your thoughts? Like,
So
because you're not flying. So
right. So when Ben got the one of the hardest radio calls in instrument is the PTAC call. And so because you never know when exactly it's coming, you kind of know 2 of the 4 things they're going to tell you, but the other 2, the surprise factor kicks in and you're like, oh, I got to listen for these 2 things. And did it happen? And
so
number of
people that are going to take instrument, PTAC stands for position, turn, altitude, and clearance.
Yeah. And so it happens it's the clearance to get onto the approach. And so when we were lining up for the approach, Ben said, hey, I'm going to take radios from this point on because I want to do that PTAC, right? Because it's absolutely something that if I were in his shoes, I want to do the same thing. So I was off radios. At that point, my responsibility was essentially nothing. I went from handling the radios to informed passenger. And so we were so close to the to landing. And I knew that Ben was in a very busy time and was distracted. So I wasn't going to ask him things like, hey, I think we should unplug these unnecessary things. I just did it. Because I knew he had battery in his iPad. I knew I had battery in my iPad. There was no need for that to be drawing on the power. So I just did it. Yeah.
And then what? Like there's still quite a bit of time from there to landing. So what we're like,
I was looking at the battery level and seeing that it was discharging, but it was showing, 11 volts. And I'm like, okay, we're absolutely going to make this. We have the runway in sight. Nothing bad is going to happen between now and landing. Of course, I had to remind myself of this. I had to tell myself in my head that nothing bad is going to happen between now and landing.
So I saw his lips moving, and it was, Ben, please don't kill me. Ben, please don't kill me. Ben, please don't kill me. Ben, please don't kill me.
It's bad if he's using the last of your battery power to put on "My Heart Will Go On" by Celine Dion to be the soundtrack to this moment that you're having. There
was a voice to text to his wife. I love you. Ben is killing me. Sue his family. It's all his fault.
Sue Ben. No, I do have one other question, Mark or Ben. Did you challenge your assumption of it being an alternator problem? Because theoretically, could it have also been early stages of, like, were you thinking about trying to see if there was any electrical smoke happening or any other things that you thought might be part of the possibilities of things going on?
I'll speak to that. The answer is no, and there's a very specific reason. There was a loud noise that just came in from nowhere, and while I didn't tie it together immediately, it was my battery light was flashing, or the JPI monitor was flashing battery. So there's 2 separate events. Now, if there were smoke, I'm sure I would have noticed that and would have probably, thought something else. But having gone through this before, I felt confident that my diagnosis of the situation was right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially with the time available. So, Nathan Ballard asked a question similar to what I'm thinking they'll probably follow up with, but, Nathan Ballard, CFII, our favorite CFII named Nathan Ballard. In hindsight, if this happened 20 minutes earlier in the flight, would you guys have declared an emergency?
Yes, I would have. I didn't the first time I had an alternator failure, but I was also VFR, and it was clear in a million. We were in IMC, and I would have let the approach control know I am declaring emergency. I'm shedding all unnecessary electronic voltage. I'm turning everything off. Let the tower know I'm coming in and clear away for me.
Yeah. So if it was an hour before that, or, like that,
I would have diverted to another airport and done the same thing too.
Okay.
Because go ahead.
I'm sorry. Had there been any sort of question on Ben's part, I was going to encourage that we declare an emergency.
Yeah. Did you have VFR options for diverting?
I don't, at that point, I mean, at the point that, when I was 10 minutes away, no, I think it was clearing up to the west.
Okay.
I think. I might have been marginal VFR, or maybe a little bit better. That's a great point. I don't remember. Mark, do you?
I don't either. And my instinct is to say no.
Yeah.
As a VFR pilot, this is the sort of question I have, right? Which is, if you're in the soup and something happens, then what do you do? And it's just, I'm a VFR pilot, right? It boggles my mind.
It's, you reach out to ATC, they're your best friend, and they're going to get you out of it. And we can talk about this in the future, but one of our Patreon supporters, who was also mentioned earlier, Alyssa, had a situation where she was relying on some info, and she relied on ATC, and she got through it because they are there to help, and they did. Yeah.
We have a commenter here, Braden Davis, who said, one of the points Seth Lake made during my instrument check ride was to tag all the circuit breakers I can kill if my alternator goes in red pulls, so you can instantly pull them and not have to think.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That is. And I've gone through this. I know my circuit breakers. We have fuzzy noises coming in. We've got a really terrible audio panel. And I know, and 1,045 hours in this airplane, which circuit breaker is. I still think that's a very good point, and a good thing to do. But I can put my hand on any circuit breaker and tell you what it is, just about almost by memory.
I think one of the values, though, that's hidden about that approach is that from a CRM standpoint, you could get almost anybody that is a reasonably capable person that's sitting next to you to be doing that for you. I suppose if it was that bad of a situation, obviously you don't want just anybody starting to pull stuff, but if it's color coded, I believe you could probably, that might be a reasonable risk to take, to have them say, pull the red ones, leave the rest of them alone.
Great point.
Unless they're Mark, where they're just going to start disconnecting absolutely everything.
I think this.
I was going really, for his headset.
It's a kind of know your plane scenario there, right? The issue that I would have, or that a Cirrus driver would have, is electric trim, right? There is no mechanical trim option, so I know where my electric trim circuit breaker is. It's not something you have to worry about in most other planes,
right?
And so it's that same sort of thing, which is, man, you really got to know your plane before you need it. And that's true in this scenario, especially. I need to think through that a lot more, right? Of what would I immediately shed the power on? And somebody in the comments said it earlier as well. They have a spreadsheet of the electrical load that each of the components causes, and that's it's a great way to do it. Yep. Know the basics of what you would immediately do. It doesn't matter if it's perfect or not, right? But boy, I need to think through that again. Yeah.
Plane places and DMV, plane places and adventures with DMV, as he made that comment.
Oh, thanks.
It's getting kind of scary where our friend Mr. Siskin is as far as storms, talking about flying into storms, flying into his house.
I keep trying to mute my microphone here. I don't know if you guys can hear what is going on, but it is wild.
Yeah. Well, Mark, thank you for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Enjoyed my time flying up with you. Thank you for all your help. Maybe we'll give AJ some time on the stage if we can get the stage doors wide enough to fit his head through. No, AJ, seriously, appreciate all that you've done for me, and it was a great flight. So, everybody, thank you very much for joining and being part of our community. We and the rest of the community are your pilot friends. So join us on Patreon, send us a PayPal drop, or contact us at midlifepilotpodcast.com. And join us next week. We will be hopefully talking to AJ, maybe another whiskey session. I might need it after that. So, but again, thanks everybody for the birthday wishes. I really appreciate it.
Happy birthday, Ben.
And
happy birthday, buddy.
Yes. And Michael Gillette, happy birthday to you, sir.
Yeah.
And anything else for the good of the order?
Michael Gillette had his first long cross country, I think he said today, with his husband. And I just love to hear newer pilots getting out there and taking those trips and bringing people along with them that they care about, and actually returning them in the same condition that you left with. And that's amazing. So I just wanted to say a special shout out for that. It's not, we talk a lot about, congratulations for this check ride pass or for whatever these things, but you know what, like the actual execution of doing the things that you're doing this for is to be equally celebrated.
Absolutely. All right. That'll do it for episode 86 of the Midlife Pilot Podcast. Good night, everybody.